Channel, AS. My dear beloved Earth humans, this is Ashtar speaking. I greet you in peace and love. I am happy that I can communicate this second message to you. Often there are different perspectives that all have some amount of merit and validity to them. Just because one perspective has some amount of validity, doesn't mean that other perspectives are wrong. In this message, I will be exploring the perspective that you, meaning your soul, is already in paradise. It's just your lower self, your mind, body, and emotions, that isn't. However, even though I believe this perspective is valuable, I also acknowledge that the perspective of I am suffering here on earth, please help me, is entirely valid and has merit to it. Indeed, I agree that the amount of suffering on earth is too much. As I shared last week, we are working to help you. With that said, let's dive into today's perspective. Spiritual people often know that they have a soul, but really they're still viewing their lower self or their vehicle as them, just with the footnote that they also have a soul. Spiritual people often know that they reincarnate, but really they're still viewing their current life as their actual existence, just with the footnote that they reincarnate. Lots of people are still fundamentally viewing themselves as a physical body and brain, one which dies after 80 years or so. And this is leading to a whole lot of suffering. I am not saying that this perspective is objectively wrong, I am just saying that this perspective will lead to suffering. Because if you believe that one short painful life is all that you'll ever get, then of course that idea causes much pain and distress. However, if you view yourself as an immortal soul and this is just one very challenging road trip that you chose to experience, then your current situation looks much less depressing. If you do incredibly evil and harmful acts, then you might get unmade, but this is very rare, and otherwise you are immortal. Therefore, today I will invite you to no longer view yourself as a brain whose existence will end after 80 years or so, and truly embrace the idea that you are a reincarnating soul. And I know that this may be easier said than done, and that is why I want to help you by making the case for that you are already in paradise worldview during the rest of this message. This might sound like I'm being callous, but from my perspective I am trying to help you see the merits of a worldview that will lead to much less suffering for you if you choose to accept it. So, let me share why I think that there is a lot of merit to the worldview that you, meaning your soul, are already in paradise, and it's just your lower self or vehicle that isn't. You probably know that you have existed for something like 1,000,000 years and that you have had something like 1,000 lives. It may be a bit more or less, depending on the person, but something like that. So, if you've had 1,000 lives, would it be more accurate to view yourself as a reincarnating soul, or would it be more accurate to view yourself as just one body and one brain and one corresponding mind, out of the thousands of bodies and brains and minds that you have had? You know that you largely create your reality. You also know that currently you are living in a reality that your soul likes, because this is giving you great soul growth, but that your mind probably dislikes this reality is painful. This indicates that the real you is actually your soul, because your soul determines what manifests, what resonates, where you reincarnate, when you die, etc. Certainly it's your soul, i.e. you, and not your mind who determines that, because you're currently in a situation that your soul likes and your mind probably dislikes. Yes, you largely create your reality. And you are your soul. You're just experiencing your lower self right now, but really you are your soul. For the rest of this message, when I say you, I will be referring to your soul. You actually are already in paradise. It's just that right now, you as a soul may not have quite as much awareness, experience, power, perspective, etc. as you want. And thus, you can make the free will choice to gain soul growth by incarnating somewhere. Because you're in paradise, this is your choice. You can reincarnate in one utopian world after the other and experience as much bliss as you want. Or you can experience a number of lives in a near paradise and then freely choose to take a field trip to a very challenging world, such as Earth, and get a lot of growth from that. However, don't worry, you're in paradise. You're an immortal soul who can't be harmed. So nothing bad can ever actually happen to you. Sure, the vehicle you're driving, namely your lower self, might get hurt quite badly, but you can just exit your vehicle whenever you want. You as the soul can arrange the death of the lower self. And you can have as many vehicles as you want, without limit. Could you picture a better paradise than this, namely a paradise where you are immortal and you can't be hurt, and you can experience as much bliss as you wish, and you also have the freedom to experience pain and challenge if you choose, but it will only ever hurt your vehicle and not you? I think that is paradise. In fact, if you were in a situation where you weren't allowed to choose to experience pain and challenge, I think that wouldn't be paradise. Believe it or not, endless pleasure does get boring after a while. Sure, your lower self, your vehicle, absolutely isn't in paradise. But you are. And yes, you are experiencing your vehicle right now, but that doesn't mean you are your vehicle. It just means that you are experiencing your vehicle. And yes, as I explained in my last message, many of you have requested that we make the Earth course a bit less painful. Many of you have said that your vehicles are getting too banged up and have requested that we make the Earth track a bit less muddy and rainy and dark. And we are doing so. However, just because you are experiencing that your vehicle is getting banged up, doesn't mean you are getting banged up. If you want to be kind to the other vehicles on the road, that is an entirely valid path. If you want to damage them and be service to self, that is an entirely valid path too, because you're damaging other vehicles and not other souls. You're an immortal being who is living in paradise, and you chose to take a day out of your immortality to take a field trip to a very tough world, possibly to get new experiences and perspectives. And you certainly are succeeding in getting those. No matter how much your lower self might think it is failing on Earth, you are actually succeeding, because even by just existing on Earth you are getting a ton of soul growth. Or if you came to Earth to help people, you are also succeeding, because even your very presence and your energy are helping other Earth humans. Now, some people might argue that their choices can make the difference between getting some and getting lots of soul growth, between helping some people versus helping a lot of people. And that's true. I agree your lower self should do its best and ideally then not stress out about the outcome, because it can't do more than its best. Some people might be worried about, if I don't learn my Earth lessons during this life, I might have to go to another Earth type of world later to learn those. However, note that it's your mind and thus your vehicle thinking that however the vehicle isn't going to reincarnate. Meanwhile, you your soul aren't in any kind of resistance to possibly doing another kind of Earth course later if necessary, possibly after first doing another few fun Pleiades courses. You aren't in resistance to pain. You are an immortal being who can't get hurt. You also have infinite time. Therefore you also can't actually fail. Because how can a being fail if that being can't get hurt and can't run out of time? There is no such thing as failure for such a being, and you are such a being. The worst thing that can happen is that you grow less quickly than other immortal beings, and that you need to take more courses than others to end up at a certain level of soul maturity. But why does it matter to an immortal being if someone else is going faster? Eventually you're all going to end up merging back into Source anyway. So there really is no way in which you can possibly fail, no matter what you do or don't do during this life. Now, most likely you want your lower self to do its best, because it's being guided by your nudges and intuition towards whatever you want to experience through your lower self, or towards the ways in which you wish to help others during this life. So I am not saying that your lower self should just sit on the couch for the rest of its life. On the other hand, even in the slightly unfortunate situation that your lower self sits on the couch for the rest of its life, then that's not actually a problem for you because you're an immortal being. Even if that happens, you're still getting experience and perspective from your current trip. And after this current trip you can always just take a break, select a new vehicle, select a new racing track and then take another drive. For an immortal being, it's no problem to take a second trip to learn some lessons that weren't learned on the first trip. So while your lower self should do its best, there's no way in which you can actually fail. Because there is no such thing as failure for the immortal being that you are. I think your lower selves are doing great, however even if they weren't, that wouldn't actually be failure for you, because there's no such a thing as failure for an immortal being. Also, if your lower self sits on the couch for the rest of its life, then that also doesn't actually say anything about your quality as a driver, or as an immortal being. Okay, you as a driver took a vehicle on a very tough track, and the vehicle had a really hard time on that very tough track. That doesn't actually prove that there's anything wrong with you as a driver. You may have had 1,000 vehicles, why does it say anything about you if one vehicle struggles on a very tough track? So, you are an immortal being. You can't actually fail. You are already in paradise. You just happen to currently be experiencing a vehicle on a very tough racing track. You just currently happen to be experiencing a lower self in a very tough world. However, just because you're experiencing your lower self, doesn't mean you are your lower self. Here is an exercise that you might find helpful. For a few days, in your thoughts only use my and I to refer to your soul, and otherwise use my lower self. So for example, if you notice yourself thinking I am tired, replace that with my lower self is tired. And right now, if the following feels genuine to you, I invite you to place a hand on your heart and a hand on your belly and to say out loud, my dear body and emotions and mind, I appreciate you so very much, because thanks to you I can experience life on earth. I am experiencing life on earth right now, therefore you are succeeding and you are doing exactly what you need to do. Thank you so very much. I love you. Or if you want to tweak the words a bit so that it does feel authentic, that is completely fine too. My dear soul, I hope that this awakened a deep knowing somewhere within you. With all the love from my soul, Ashtar for Era of Light.